Hey, what's up? Last episode, I spoke about the studium and punctum. When talking about the studium, I mentioned the photographic myth and promised to make a video concentrating on this, so here we are. I'll go back to Cohen Wessing's photograph of Nicaragua to explore this idea. To begin with, we have to touch on some basic semiotic terminology and look at the differences between a photograph and written language a little bit. Let's start with the signifier. In this case, it is the image of the soldier. In a written account of the scene, though, it would be the word soldier. A signifier is any material that signifies. The word soldier in and of itself is just a sequence of letters that we have to parse to see the referent in our mind, an actual soldier. This brings us to the second term, the referent. So, the referent is the specific thing the signifier denotes or stands for. The signifier is the word soldier, and the referent is an actual soldier. We don't really have to read an image the same way we read a word for our minds to recreate the proverbial soldier. The soldier is there for us to see in a photograph, like Bart wrote at the start of this book. It's as if, quote, the photograph always carries its referent with itself, end quote. But if we want to get extra nerdy here, we could actually argue that the silver highlights on a piece of film, ink on this book, or pixels in your monitor are the signifiers, and your brain reconstruct them into the referent, an actual soldier. Okay, so hopefully we understand the clear-cut relationship between signifier and referent. Now, the next step is to look at how the word itself and the picture of the soldier can signify any number of other things. A soldier can signify war, violence, conflict. They are all valid ways for it to operate as a sign. See, I also introduced another term, the sign, but it really needs of the signified for its existence. The signified here would be war, violence, or conflict, a subjective interpretation of the image, one step beyond the referent. When the soldier means any of these ideas, it has become a sign. See, even though this is just a picture of a person wearing a uniform, our mind interprets it based on our own cultural nurturing, a sign of war. The sign constitutes the associative whole between the signifier and the signified. The signifier is hollow, empty. The sign is solid, full of meaning. Bart uses the example of a bundle of roses in mythologies. When you give roses to a partner, you are signifying passion. The roses are the signifier, and Bart's passion is a signified. In this transaction, the roses are a sign for passion. Okay, even though the relation between these three concepts is very narrow, almost too close for them to provide any sort of insight, Bart admits that this is a way of establishing a scheme for a more interesting interaction, that of the myth. I understand myths or photographic myths in two different ways. I'll do my best to explain them both, and you can choose whichever one works best for you, or you can choose either depending on a case-to-case basis. First, the myth derived from a single signifier. Okay, so the soldier here signifies war. It could be any war in any country fought by any soldier. This function turns it into a sign. Let's call it simply war. War as a concept embodied by the image of the soldier can operate in a secondary semiological system like the image itself did in the first one. When we take the sign and turn it into a signifier in a secondary system, a mythical one, the connotations of war will be informed by our own cultural upbringing. Destruction, loss, political unrest, danger, violence, this can all be signified by the idea of war, but we are not deciphering an actual image anymore here, or the linguistics of a word. We are building upon it a myth based on our own subjectivity. The second way is the myth derived from a global reading. This seems to be Bart's preferred method of landing on a mythical reading. And it makes sense. Like, when we look at this photograph, we're not isolating the photograph. We're looking at everything as a global sign, pretty much. And here, let's take a look at the same photograph and read the connotations. We have three soldiers, not only covering the area of photographic reconnaissance from corner to corner, but one of them is walking to circle around us and another one towards us. Part of the third one lies behind the corner, potentially blocking our only escape. We're surrounded not only by soldiers, but also by destruction, rubble, political graffiti, and barricades as far as the eye can see. The nuns could potentially help us. They can be signs of morality, fairness, aid, solace, but they're both behind the soldiers, out of reach, and one of them seems indifferent. This reading of the signifiers as a group in context, presents a myth. Nicaragua in 1979 was a tense, stressful, and helpless environment, completely overtaken by military forces. In this case, this is probably very close to the truth. We're dealing with photojournalistic material here, and when it's done ethically and with integrity, that's what it aims to accomplish. But not all photographic images create a truthful myth. Whichever one of these two approaches you choose to go with, this myth is the information presented by a photograph that Barth calls the studium. The broad brush strokes with which photographs can paint a picture of a subject that gives us subjective understanding of the elements under interaction within a scene. Hope this was all somewhat clear. Semiotics can be really frustrating and dry for many of us, but I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to dust off some of my knowledge and provide some content that relates to the previous video. Go out, take photos, don't think so much about them, but thinking and shooting can be like oil and water. You need them both to cook, though. I'll see you next week. Like, subscribe, and all that.